weekly live show brought to you by the team at Bunker Labs, national network of veteran, military spouse entrepreneurs dedicated to helping grow our ecosystem. I'm your host, the one and only Iron Mike Steadman, coming to you from the beautiful city of Newark, New Jersey, joined by my co-host, Amy Morrison, and our special guest today, David Piatek from VA Housing Education. David, did I
What's
get that last name right?
close, but it's all good.
It's like the
Excited to
platoon.
be here with you guys.
It's like the platoon sergeant trying to stand up, read roll call, just butchering everybody's last name. Yeah.
Everybody's.
So before we chop it up with David, I'm gonna go ahead and pass over to Amy to share any updates that are happening in the bunker.
Cool. Thanks, Mike. So this week we've got just a couple of things. So you can join us in Washington, D.C. on October 19th for the USAA pitch competition, powered by Bunker Labs. 7 contestants will compete for a top prize of $50,000, and I will put the link in the comments/chat. And then also we've got, what else we got? Blog spotlight this week. We've got a new blog spotlight on the Osorio brothers. So Juan Pablo and Julio Osorio, Marine brothers who both have started businesses in marketing and accounting industries, respectively. And so you can read their stories on the blog. And again, I will post those links in the chat. And that is honestly all we got going on this week.
Appreciate it, Amy. If I'm not mistaken, too, we got the ambassador fly-in October 16th through 18th.
18th through the 20th in San Antonio. We will be, Bunker Labs is going to be taking over San Antonio for a couple days.
Awesome. Yeah, so I'll be down in Texas, y'all. Come say hi. I'll be down in San Antonio with that flying. Man, Xavier and the team are doing some great work, providing programming and support to our volunteer ambassadors out there. And I'm excited to go down there and capture some stories. So it's a good time. Anything else, Amy? Any big competitions coming up?
Maybe. That is a good question, and you should check out our blog because we have the calendar on the blog, and the calendar on the blog knows better than I do. So yeah, I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, if you haven't done so, man, make sure y'all check out that blog post that Keith put together earlier this year that lists out every single competition, grant opportunity, accelerator, etc. I mean, that's what this is about, is passing that knowledge and those resources. So appreciate it. Go ahead,
we
Amy.
do the featured post on the blog also, so bunkerlabs.org/blog. The featured post should be our resource post that we just put together, and it's just basically a listicle of like all the links of different resources like you can check out on the blog and also, you know, elsewhere in the ecosystem.
Cool. Appreciate it.
Yep. Okay.
All right. Without further ado, our guest today, Mr. David Piatek. We're going to be talking about VA housing education. I think this is an interesting time to talk about it too, because mortgage rates are like at an all-time high. And I know you bring a lot of insights on it. So please go ahead and take a moment, introduce yourself to the bunker, and then let's get into what you do with the VA housing education.
Awesome. So David Piatek, founder of VA Housing Education, have a background in lending, real estate as an instructor as well. Been in the military for the last 14 years now, serving in the Army, National Guard, and in finance for the last 18 years. So excited to be here. I've been with Bunker Labs since the very beginning of time.
Really? Oh, yeah, that's right. You're based in Chicago. What year did you connect with them? Was it 2014 then or 2015?
It must have been because I originally joined with the Council of 100.
Okay.
Oh, and yeah, then it switched to the Veterans Leadership Council, and that's when we were at the, I think with Todd at 1871. Yeah, so I was there like, early when they just launched that whole initiative.
What keeps you coming back around?
I mean, the people are great. It's a great network, and you're as strong as your network.
So this venture, the VA housing education, how did it get started? Where are you at with it? Let's dive in.
Yeah, so I started the company about 6 months ago or so. So what I had to do is I took a step back from my regular job, right, being in the lending space and then also being in the real estate space, and wanted to provide an environment for people to be able to go somewhere and kind of go around that stigma that, you know, that people in real estate and finance are a bunch of used car salesmen, right? So how do you actually like go and provide education? So that's why we started VA Housing Education, where we just give out and pump out content for military members to use and utilize their VA home loan, no matter what stage in life they are. Because like you said, too, rates are high, but does it make a difference, right? There's all these questions that people have. Some people are like, hey, I missed out on having super low interest rates. What do I do now? Right. So all these things are always coming up. And we're also covering trending topics in the VA space because things change with the VA home loan. And that's another challenge that veterans face is because the program adapts, but the information doesn't get pushed out. So a lot of times veterans get the wrong info and disqualify themselves from using the VA home loan.
What's your background with housing? What made you just feel so excited to bring this focus on this particular problem versus others?
Great question. So I started in the lending business right when I was 18 years old, right? And so I just did regular financing all around. I joined the military after I started my career back in 2009. And then around about, let's say 7 years ago, kind of around that time that Bunker Labs was created, I was like, you know what? I have a lot of people from my unit coming to me with questions. Other units are coming to me to do presentations. And I'm like, why am I not focusing on the brothers and sisters that are out there? I know what they go through, the challenges that they face, and I can relate to that, right? So it just was kind of a natural pairing. And then it just took some time later to actually come up with a way to deliver that information that's just kind of sorry, that's just kind of like from a third party perspective, just to educate people on what they can do. And if they want to work with us from there, more than happy to work with them.
Well, it looks like we got our first question already. Tim Cooley says, I have a VA loan. I want to start looking at buying a second home. Is there a way to leverage my VA loan to do this? I have a good amount of equity into this home.
So that's a great question. So when it comes, so you can have actually multiple VA home loans at the same time. In fact, there's actually no limit, but there's different sets of rules because the VA doesn't want to make it too simple. So if you don't have an outstanding VA home loan, right, at the time of closing, like you're selling your home, you've never used the VA loan, or you don't have an outstanding loan, there's no limit on what you can buy. So you want to buy a $3 million 4-unit building in Chicago, you could do so with no money down. Now, if you have a current VA home loan, and let's say you're in Chicago, then you're going to be capped at the county limit for Fannie Mae, which is $726,200. Anything over that amount requires a 25% down payment. And I know I'm getting technical because a lot of this stuff is very technical. So what you can actually do if you have a current VA home loan and you have a lot of equity in it, you can actually borrow against that property to purchase another property and use your VA home loan as long as it's a primary residence. So like sometimes if you want to buy a second home with a VA loan, that's not possible. It's designed to be a primary residence.
Gotcha.
But yes, you could definitely leverage your current property in multiple ways, right? You can do a home equity line of credit so you preserve your first mortgage, or you could do a fixed rate second mortgage because you know how much you're going to borrow to be able to purchase the next property.
So you said, do you ever see any business owners taking advantage of the VA home loan?
100%. Yeah. And so it depends on where you live. I'm going to use Chicago as an example, but plenty of places have these. Is if you want to purchase a multi-unit and live mortgage free, then purchasing a multi-unit is the way to do it. So some people will go out, buy $1 million property. We just had that happen in January. They didn't use a VA loan. Then they 6 months later, they're like, hey, I want to move away from this area and then use my VA home loan. And they purchase another property for the same price point. Now they have $2 million in assets and they're not paying a single mortgage payment, right? So there's ways to leverage these things, but yes, the VA loan is a phenomenal loan product. But what you have to realize is that if you want to use it as an investment tool, which you can, sometimes people will say you can't use it as an investment vehicle. That's not true. That's an FHA requirement. That is not a VA requirement. It is your God-given right to use the loan as you please. But there's just obviously some restrictions to that. But yes, but you can definitely use it for that.
When people hear this, oh, no money down, they essentially think it's like free money. Is pros and cons of putting money down?
So it depends on your situation. If you have a service connected disability, you don't pay a VA funding fee, right? So if you're buying a place for 400,000 and your loan is 400,000, you have zero equity. So if you're thinking you're going to sell in 3 years, that's a tough sell, right? But if you're going to be there for a long haul, that's great. If you have to pay a VA funding fee and you do no money down, you're literally buying a house upside down equity, because now that funding fee gets rolled into the mortgage. So does that make sense? Right? For a lot of individuals, it does, because not a lot of people have all this money just to be able to put down. And in today's environment, it almost, you put down 5%, it barely changes your payment, maybe $150, $200, right? So you kind of have to look at that piece to that.
What are some of the traps with the VA home loan?
Traps as far as
any landmines, mistakes people are making.
I'll tell you that if we have like 4 hours, then let's go through them all. So this is kind of the thing that I'll give you some of the quickest, the best snippets, right? Make sure that you're working with a lender that knows how the program works. And I'm not talking the big banks, because they charge also the highest in fees, right? So average closing costs across the country is 3%. You work with your favorite veteran banks, it's 6%. So you pay a lot more for the same service, right? So you really have to be careful when with that. The other component is there's a lot of things that you can do with the program that you will get disqualified for, even though you can do them. And I'll give you an example. Veterans, or today's affordable housing, is really condos. But condos require a special VA approval. And veterans get denied all the time to be like, oh, no, it's too hard. The condo won't get approved, or it's already denied. You can't buy in it. But the reality is that, one, it's very easy to get a condo approved or denied. Two, you can literally buy any condo you want with the VA condo waiver, even if the building is denied. That's why a lot of veterans get steered away from those programs to use conventional or FHA loans, but they can actually refinance back into a VA loan with just something like that. Another big one, is that you can't buy properties as is, because the VA has requirements for the condition of the property. Reality is that you can do an escrow holdback and do the repairs yourself after you've purchased the property as a buyer. So that is like a common one. We're like, we can't find a property because everything has to be in perfect condition. Trust me, it doesn't.
I want to go to our chat. If you guys got any question for David, feel free to go ahead and drop it in the chat. Tim Cooley asked a great question. And I know we probably have, a lot of viewers that are tuning in, and they're balancing between, hey, do I go ahead and purchase a property? Do I, take out my money and use it for my business? Because these are the real things that we have to start thinking about, particularly when people have families and they're transitioning out of the military.
Yeah, no, and if I can, Mike, let me give you an example of something that really hits a home on, should you buy now or should you wait, right? Because what do people want? Why are people waiting to buy homes? Because they think, well, the rate's going to drop, so I'm going to get a lower mortgage payment, right? That's kind of like what people are thinking. But I'm going to give you this example because I just did a video on it this morning, and I compared $400,000, $500,000 price points, $600,000, $700,000, $800,000, and $900,000 price points. So let me tell you that if today's rate at 8% on a $600,000 mortgage, okay, is going to have about a $4,200 payment at 7% or 6.75. So rates drop, but remember, when rates drop, values go up. This happens every single time, and rates are cyclical. Now you're talking about 6.75 on a $700,000 property, payments about $4,600. So still, rates dropped, values went up. You're still paying about $300 more. If you lock in a property today at that $600,000 and rates drop to 6.75, your payment's about $3,900. So you save $680 or $648.60 on keeping a property and just refinancing when rates drop. And this is across all the price points, from $200,000 to $900,000 in increments of $100,000.
Now, I read a lot online, and it says a lot of the millennials are renting and they're not purchasing property. And so the same's for our military members. What are the trends are you seeing? Are you seeing a lot more vets take advantage of the VA home loan, or?
Well, the internet has definitely helped to be able to bring awareness to the community around the VA home loan. The challenge is the misconceptions. So sometimes people think like, oh, I can't purchase because of blank. And then we're like, wait a second, you can actually become a homeowner. The other piece to that too is when somebody, well, if you move around a lot, I think it's tough, right? Do you purchase a property knowing you're going to move? Well, it depends, right? If you're in a high military area, so I'm going to use like Arlington, Virginia. You're in what's down south of the Navy base, the big one. It's by Richmond, Virginia Beach, right? So if you're
Yep.
in those areas where they have a lot of military, and you might be looking at a multi-unit or buying a single-family home that you can easily rent out and cover the mortgage payment, that might be a way that for you could build wealth through the VA home loan, because you hold it for 6 to 10 years, then sell that property. Now you have equity and you have your VA home loan back, right? So there's a lot of nifty things that you can do with that.
We got another question in the chat. Someone says, when they say you need to live in it for a year or your primary home, who actually checks that? Like, who comes by and does the check? Because I don't think they do.
Okay, so that is a myth. The VA does not have a minimum time requirement for you to live in that property. When you go to closing, you sign a sorry guys. When you go to closing, you sign a what's it called? That you intend to occupy the property within a 60-day period. If you live in the property for 1 day and then you decide you don't want to live there is zero rules around that. That is a misconception. There's no time frame requirement to live in a property. In fact, some people buy a multi-unit and 4 months later decide to buy a single family home with the VA home loan, and they can do so. No time limit.
Are there any trends you see in the industry moving forward? Like as you look at 2024 as a year for people to purchase?
I'm going to give you a couple things. One, I think it's cyclical, right? So I think rates are going to start dropping over the next year. The challenge is there's a new lawsuit that's pending right now. It's called the Mueller versus the National Association of Realtors and the 4 biggest real estate companies that are out there. And basically they're saying that when you're a buyer and you buy a home, your agent gets paid by the seller's agent, right? So they basically came out and said like, hey, this is the antitrust, like they shouldn't be doing this because they're inflating prices. Anyways, companies are starting to settle for this. That means that buyers would have to actually pay their buyer's agent to use them to purchase a property. There's a small nuance. The VA loan doesn't allow veterans using a VA home loan to pay a realtor a fee to use their services. So, we have a couple things, right? I think rates are going to be shifting over, but then veterans are going to be facing a different challenge coming up over the next couple of months into the year if everything goes through on this lawsuit. And I don't know how that's going to be remedied, to be honest, because I called the VA and asked them, and they're like, "Oh, these things takes 6 months to a year to kind of for new legislation to pass." So we'll see.
I have to say, you're extremely knowledgeable in this space. Where do you spend your time getting all this information from to turn it into content for our audience?
You know what? This is the only subject that I'm a fish to water, that I could absorb it all and put it together. Everything else in life, it's shaky. But yeah, just reading the handbook and just having a passion for helping people.
Love it. Well, before we transition to book Rex, again, if you have any questions for David, go ahead and drop them in the chat. We already got one. Shout out to Frank. Frank says, how can I get in touch with you? I would love to connect. I'm in talks with a private owned to possibly purchase their property. I would like to try and use my VA.
Yeah. So if you guys, if you go to vahousingeducation.com, you guys can schedule a call with me there, or you can just reach out to me, David at vahousingeducation.com. Happy to set up a call and talk with you guys. So again,
amazing.
Yeah, vahousingeducation.com, or just send me an email, David at vahousingeducation.com. And one of the things that we do, right, is we can help you with the lending piece of the thing answer whatever questions you have. You're not going to get badgered. You're going to, and then if you want to help with the lending side, we can help you. And then if you want to get connected with a realtor, we can help you with that as well. One quick question I saw: you cannot use the VA home loan to purchase outside the United States, technically, because you can still borrow, like in Puerto Rico, like wherever our territories are. I believe you can use the VA home loan on that. I would
Amazing.
just have to double check it. It's in the VA handbook.
So with that said, book recs. David, what book recommendation do you have for our viewers today?
I had Never Split the Difference.
Tell us about that. That's the FBI interrogator, right?
Yeah, and and I actually did a recent course with the John Reed, like an advanced interrogations course I just did just a couple of weeks ago. So basically, the book just talks about just that, right? Never split the difference. And I'll give you a good, and also it just lets you know, like, really, when you're talking with someone, listen to them because they give you a lot of the information that you need in order to negotiate by just letting somebody talk. And I'll give you an example that he used as well is that if you're leaving the house, right, and why you never split the difference. If you're leaving the house and you want to wear blue shoes, but your wife wants you to wear white shoes, you wouldn't go out the house wearing one blue and one white shoe, right? It just wouldn't make sense. But a lot of times people think that splitting the difference is one of the easiest ways to do that, right? Especially we see that a lot in real estate. I did that on my own purchase of my place. I said this amount, they said that amount. And then, I did it with one, they came back with another. And then we just said, well, let's just split the difference. So, but this is before I read the book. But again, love it. And I highly recommend it. It's also a really easy read and it's something you listen to in the car. I do a lot of road trips. So
That's a good point.
I don't know if you've read it before or not.
I have, and I need to revisit it because I'll tell you, a lot of my coaching clients that I work with, they're having issues with employees, right, and hiring, right, and I'm having to let them know, hey, man, this sounds like a negotiation to me. And so, especially when you have like a key employee that decides to pop smoke, because they're not happy or whatever, and they want to talk through, what it would look like for them to stay there. And I think that's a good book as a resource for that. So I need to revisit that, and I appreciate you bringing it up. My book rec for the week is Social Startup Success by Kathleen. I forgot her last name, but essentially it's about scaling up a nonprofit organization. So I've been talking about this on the transition. I've had a lot of success over the last summer with my nonprofit Ironbound Boxing. Got a grant from the Ultimate Fighting Championship. Got a grant from the Dick's Sporting Goods Foundation, and got a fellowship with the Fund for New Leadership. And so we are at that phase now where we need to start scaling up and getting a lot more efficient with our operations. And I don't know about you, David, but you can read a book, but you're not in the space to really understand, digest, and implement the material, right? So I've read Social Startup Success twice over the last 5 or 6 years or so. But I'm actually in the point now where like I can actually start, like I see a lot of the stuff that she's talking about, because sometimes you can read a book, it can be a little bit early for you, but now as we're going through a lot of these growing pains, definitely revisiting it. It's called Social Startup Success: How the Best Nonprofits Launch, Scale Up, and Make a Difference.
Yeah, and that's kind of like to your point on that. It takes time, because if you don't understand the concepts or you can't even understand how to implement them, it's kind of, but you should still put that in the back of your head to be like, all right, when this comes up. But yeah, rereading the book helps significantly on that. So agreed.
So before we wrap up here, David, where can people find you? How can they support what you're doing with the VA housing education?
One, if you guys could like and subscribe to my YouTube channel, it's VA Housing Education. If you guys want to get a hold of me, you can just go to vahousingeducation.com and schedule a call, or you can just hit me up via email, david@vahousingeducation.com.
What I gotta ask you while you're on, what camera is that you're using? This is a really good camera.
It's a Sony A7 IV, and then I have a GM, I think 35 to 70 millimeter lens.
Gotcha.
It's nice because I use it as a recorder. A lot of people ask like, what do I use? But it's nice for when you actually do videos as well, because it records in the same quality on OBS. So
100%. Yeah, I have one of those nice cameras. I need to use it more. I end up just going to my Logitech Brio or my MacBook camera. Yeah. Now, before we go, I got to acknowledge our sponsors for the Transition Podcast, MetLife Foundation. I want y'all to make sure y'all are checking out the podcast. Last week, I released an episode talking about the importance of getting back to why. When you first start your business, you get so excited, right? You're running off of just pure adrenaline. It's like the honeymoon phase of entrepreneurship, right? That first month, you got this great idea. You're telling people about it. But what happens when you get in that blocking and tackling phase? You know what I'm talking about? 1 month turns into a year turns into 2.5 years, right? You're in a different season of life. Now you're in that grind. And when things get hard, you start having cash flow issues, you lose key employees, right? You can forget why you started on this journey in the first place. And so what I did on last week's episode was I talked about the importance of getting back to why. Simon Sinek has this book, Start With Why. And again, when you hear this stuff early on, when you're just fighting for margin, trying to get your first customers, this stuff sounds hokey pokey, right? You're like, what do I care about why, man? I just need to get my first client. I need to validate my business model. But when you are in it, I am telling you, it gets hard and it gets real, and you need to keep your why front and center. So check out that podcast. I see David nodding his head because before we went live, you were talking about the struggle of running a business, having a family, having all these conflicting priorities, man. It's not easy.
No, it is. And it gets harder as time goes on because you have less time. And so how do you balance that out, right? It's one of the number one things I talk about is work-life balance. It's tough.
Yeah. And before we go, do me a favor, y'all. If there's a topic you would like me to cover on the Transition Podcast, please go ahead and drop it in the chat or message me directly on LinkedIn at Iron Mike Steadman. Until next time, everyone, peace, love. Have a great rest